image in the background. Let's give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? All right, here we are. This is the first day going live. We are doing the first day of video. This is all around self-expression. This is one of my big focal points. And I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of the history around why I'm so into the voice and a bit about my past, why I've chosen the voice as a field to coach on specifically, and also why human potential and human expression has become one of the biggest things for me. Now, firstly, I was raised as a musician, and raised as a musician, like my dad was a musician, my mum was not. Now, this caused all sorts of rifts between expression and what was okay and what was not okay. As far as history, my dad was an alcoholic and still is. And part of my journey has been coming to terms with all of that. Part of it, it's been a big portion of that, and just accepting the fact that he was the way that he was. And him being a musician, I was surrounded by music all the time. So I could say that music is in my bones, it's in my blood. It's a thing that it's going to be a part of my life, whether I want it to or not. So the big part for me is to embrace it. Now, when I hit about 20 years old, I started going to open mic nights, and this was terrifying. I'd never really performed much in front of people except for family, and that started the journey of me expressing myself. Before that, I'd stayed pretty quiet. And this one was me being in the limelight, me being in front of people, having people applaud for what I was doing and cheer me on and all of these things. So it was a good feeling. Now, moving forward into like the last 12 years, I did it full time. I pursued it. I traveled down New South Wales, Victoria, so down the East Coast, and toured a lot. The one problem that I'd had was that every single time I would perform, I would arrive at the venue, I would try and keep it as low key as possible. I didn't want anyone to notice me. And then I would get to the point of actually performing, which meant sitting in front of the microphone and playing the songs. And as soon as I'd get to that point, and then I would let things go. I would let any mental things that I'd had go. I would let everything go and just express. And I would go into this zone. I'd go into a bubble. And this bubble was great. It felt like I was able to escape, and I was able to hide myself on the stage. And now this became a problem when it came to speaking in between songs. Speaking in between songs requires speaking with people. It requires being able to interact with the people. And most of the time, I didn't want to interact with anyone. It's a big problem. So in order to interact with people, it requires me to talk outside of the songs. And the songs were all I wanted to do. So from there, I was able to be as quiet as possible. So I would say as little amount of words. I was sort of doing the thing, and when I would do it, I would dissociate. So I would say something and I would basically dissociate from anything, any rational thought or any sense of feeling in my body. I would just kind of say the absolute minimum, what the song was, make a little small banter comment, not anything that I actually stood behind. I didn't really want anyone to respond. So most of the time I would only give something when the audience gave me something. So it was this transactional thing where I would wait, and if they didn't reply, I wouldn't say anything. If they didn't acknowledge what I was doing, then I wouldn't say anything. And so that led me down this whole path of feeling I'm not really entertaining. So I was playing the songs, I was writing the songs, I was passionate about the songs, and this was one area. This was where it stopped. So I had the second area, which is entertainment, which is the other side of performing, and I wasn't doing it. I hated it. I didn't want to do it. And so I continued this for about 10 or so years. COVID hit. And after COVID, throughout COVID, I was like, no, I don't think this is for me. I don't really want to do this. Truthfully known, I didn't dive very deep into the work. And diving into what it was that I really wanted, diving into goals, diving into some form of strategy to achieve those goals. And now the big crux of this situation is that I started losing my mojo. I started losing the whole vibe and everything, every reason that I started doing music in the first place. It started disintegrating. That started coming into things like writer's block and coming into turning up to gigs, dreading them the entire time, dreading actually turning up. And then I'd turn up to the gig and I'd be like, I'm okay temporarily, because as soon as I start singing, it relieves all of that. Now, when we look into addictive patterns, this has created a form of addictive pattern around performing. We create this addictive pattern around the actual performance and the singing of the songs, and what we're left with is an addiction to playing live. Not an addiction to entertainment, not an addiction to turning up, not to setting up the gear, not to interacting with people, not to connect with people, but simply just to play the music. And I say just to play the music because that's what I thought was the core of music. The core of being in the music industry was playing music. And yes, it is. That is the product. Then there's the delivery of the product. Then there's the performance. There's the making sure that people are actually receiving what we're doing. And so this sparked up the teaching side, the coaching. Within the coaching was different approaches, different ways to look at my mind and different ways to look at how I approach certain things. Because when I approach things in a holistic way, in a way that is inclusive of, all of the spiritual elements, all of the physical practice elements that I've learned over the years, to embody things like the soul and embody things such as, wild out there concepts, open-mindedness, energy. And I started exploring all these realms and working out okay, the way that I've been approaching this in the past has been, well, let's say, I could say flawed, because what was happening is me not wanting to actually be heard. Because we'll take it back, I was performing music to people and I didn't want them to actually receive what I was performing. I wanted them just to tune out. I wanted everyone to, I wanted to do the thing, I wanted to do music, and I didn't want anyone to receive it. This is what I was saying. And now this leads me into polarities and pendulums. So for example, I can say, well, I don't want anyone to validate me. I don't want anyone to receive what I'm saying. This is still on a want spectrum. So it flip-flops between me performing the song and not wanting anyone to hear it. Then I finish the song and I want people to hear it. Didn't want, now I want. And unfortunately, when this stuff is split up, we end up not getting what we want. We end up getting what we're actually calling out, which is, if I say I don't want attention, I'm saying that I want attention. It's still the same thing. So looking at this from the holistic perspective and a sense of holographics, actually, when we can unpack our map of the world and start to apply it to different areas, we can connect the dots and make sense of why we do things in the way that we do them, why we have certain charge around certain things, why some things just don't work out for us and why some things do, why I feel so confident in the middle of a song and feel so small and closed up in front of an audience once I finish the song. There's something there. And whilst we are constantly maximizing and minimizing ourselves, and I'm going to be big when I'm performing and I'm going to be small when I'm not performing, this creates an incongruency between the way that you show up. And this is a problem as a performer, as a coach, as an educator, as a salesperson, as an influencer. If you are showing up in your day-to-day life, making yourself small, and then you arrive on camera and all of a sudden you're bigger than life itself, there's an incongruence there. So which one is the real you? And are you bringing your real self, your true soul's authentic voice and your expression? Are you bringing that through in every single area of your life? And I say this because I wasn't doing this. I was being confident in certain areas of my life, and then in other areas, I would make myself small and insignificant. This was to gain some sort of ego validation and to congratulate myself on a job well done. Now, I wanted other people to do this for me, and yet I wasn't willing to claim that that was what I wanted. So you can see how the resonance and the vibration is off here. For example, even doing this video and recording this, when I'm recording this video, because I'm not making this for content, all of a sudden I'm having a flowing conversation where it just seems to feel natural, and it's like this is where you can start to speak off camera. But ultimately, I want to speak with you. I don't want to speak with the person that is, supposedly on a podcast. There's all sorts of these techniques, and really, I want this to be, I'm speaking this to you. And, marketing wise, yep, maybe there's some sort of way if I were to talk about something and it triggers you, I'd rather say it to you. I'd rather say it and direct it and make it for you. Because everything that I say is, I want to impart this information for you to discern whatever you want to do with it. And you can make of it what you want. Because that's the nature of this platform. You pick and choose what you like. And if things trigger you, then they stay in your mind, and you're gonna keep having it play on your mind until you face that thing. The other day I was talking with a friend about what the meaning of a trigger or the nature of polarization is. And if someone posts a polarizing post, what happens is people who read it, people who hear it, are faced with a shift in their perception. Now, it's done in a way of, okay, they have their belief. Say this is their belief. The polarizing belief comes along and says, all right, well, what you think is wrong. Okay, so you go, and it knocks them off their pedestal. Now, you can go and defend your certain belief. And you're well within your rights to do so. However, what it is doing is allowing it to shift off its perspective and go, actually, what is it that I truly believe? Because this thing that you've knocked me off was obviously quite fragile. Otherwise, you wouldn't have knocked me off something and shaken my foundations. So the question here being is, if you are triggered by something, if someone said something so polarizing and it pissed you off, why are you pissed off about it? Because if you're pissed off about something that someone else said, that's highlighting. And if you're pissed off about something that someone else has said and you're triggered, and if you're pissed off about something that someone has said, and it's triggered you, it was polarizing, this is a beautiful chance for you to reflect on what that actually means to you. Because staying triggered and attacking the other person doesn't really achieve anything except bolster your own position. Now, if you've been knocked off your perspective by a polarizing argument, the opportunity that you have is to be able to reflect on that and go, why am I so attached to this? Why is this belief so important to me that someone can come along and just knock it off me and piss me off so easily? I would suggest that belief is not a place of strength for you. If you have to defend your belief, I would argue that your belief is extremely weak and it's ego driven. It doesn't have any sense of stability in this world. It doesn't have a sense of, and you don't even believe it yourself. The reason being that you bring up anger in order to defend it. If you're bringing up anger in order to defend a belief that you have, that belief is rocky and deserves some form of review. If you get triggered by people if your belief, when it's butted up against, if you get angry when someone butts up against one of your beliefs, my question to you is that belief actually worth holding on to if it makes you that fucking angry? What often happens when people trigger us is that our current belief is knocked off its pedestal. We have such a great opportunity here. We can actually choose to realign it in a space. We can actually choose to realign it in a space that makes sense to us. And maybe it makes more sense. Maybe the space that doesn't leave us feeling angry and pissed off and attacking the world. Because those beliefs are movable things. They're movable objects within our being, within our existence. And as soon as someone comes along and contests that, well, we want to hold on to what we believe. We want to hold on to this because this is me. This is what made me me. And what if what made you isn't what makes your soul your soul? This is ego stuff we're talking about. This is the stuff that the ego gets to a certain point and it wants to bolster it because it keeps it safe. So it introduces fear, it introduces anger and all of these things and pride in order to keep you the way that it wants you to be. It's safe. And as soon as a new idea comes along, you come in with your ego and say, I don't want to change. That could be you achieving your dreams and your goals, or that could be you actually being humble. Now, ego is something that can be covered on all spectrums. Your ego can be making yourself inferior to everyone around you. And that ego of you becoming inferior and being inferior, that ego of you being inferior that holds you in place, that crystallizes you. You've got this like rocky exterior. And you say, I won't change for anyone because this is what I believe. Your ego is you saying, this is my belief, this is who I am, and I won't change for anyone. This ego can keep you in place from actually achieving your dreams and goals. It can also prevent you from being humble and learning from people around you. This is a big thing on the superiority-inferiority complex, where you pit some people and you pedestal others. This is all ego-driven. And now ego is not bad. Ego is simply something that is. Your ego just exists. It's part of the game. It's part of the game of learning. It's part of the game of life. It's part of the game of success and failures. It's part of the game of communication. It's part of the game of, life. And whilst you're resisting this movement, you're also resisting everything else in your life. If you're caring about what other people think about you, ego-driven. If you care about what you're wearing because of how other people are going to perceive you, ego-driven. If you care about what you're wearing because you simply feel good wearing it, maybe not ego-driven, because you may wear something out of comfort or because you like the aesthetic of how you look. As soon as you start trying to bolster that as something of an identity for yourself, and you are offended by someone actually saying, hey, I don't like what you're wearing, how easily can you be knocked off your pedestal? You went out feeling like $1 million and all of a sudden this person comes in and says something to you that offends you, and then you don't wear that dress anymore. You don't wear that necklace anymore. You don't wear that thing because that person has offended you. Or you go on wearing the same thing, but you've got that chip of a loss of self-confidence. So you're hoping that no one sees you wearing it, right? Because you know you love it, but you're also doing it because you want the validation from others. Now, what if you're wearing something that you didn't really rate that highly, and then someone came in and said, oh, I love that thing on you. I love that dress on you. I love that shirt on you. I love that hat. I love those sunglasses. All of a sudden, your ego gets boosted in a way of, I use boosting. Actually, the word that I want to use here is solidifying. So it solidifies what you want to be true. Someone says, I love that necklace, and you go, yes, confirmation of what I'm doing. So you hold on to that, and the ego grasps on for life. And your ego is going to keep holding on to that. And what happens when someone says, well, that thing is terrible or it doesn't suit you? You can use the bolstering of that other person that said, oh, well, this person said they love it. And now you're saying you hate it. You can choose to listen to the positive comments, or you can choose to listen to the negative. Ultimately, the only one that actually matters is your own opinion of yourself. You validating yourself. Now, this leads me into another realm here, because when it comes to the voice, you have your core soul's voice. This is you, purity. This is when you're born. Now, as you get older, you're educated, you learn from your parents, you learn from your colleagues, you learn from the people at school, you learn from your extended family. Now one thing, this new realm, okay, so you've got your voice here, and this is the purity of your soul's voice. It's this tiny little thing, right? Here, you have your soul's voice. This is you when you were born. This is you as a child, before you learnt anything about the world. And then from your parents, they told you off once, so it adds a layer, right? Here you have your here you have your soul's voice. It's pure, untainted, innocent. It wants to express and create and share that with the world, naturally. And then in come your parents. And your parents say, don't do that. They add another layer, add another layer, and add another layer. And with each layer, that starts to create our map of the world. So instead of that raw expression that we once had, we start expressing from the voice of our parents. We start expressing from the voice of our friends, our extended family, our siblings. Before too long, we've got this massive cluster of shell and filter that's around our soul's voice. And so what this does is this means that everything that you say is filtered through every layer that has been spoken to you, that you have bolstered in your head, and you've believed that it's you. Every single time that you believe, oh, okay, well, we don't swear out in public, or we don't make loud noises around other people. We only do that at home, okay? We set these rules for ourselves. And within these rules become our limitations. So when we go into the world, then we go, well, I'm just going to be quiet because this is just normal. And if someone else is loud, we go, you can't do that. We reinforce the beliefs that we've learnt over the years. And this is a shame, because what happens, a shame, right? It's a shame that this happens, because we're ashamed to express ourselves. You start off with your voice being this innocent, pure expression, creative force that wants to be shared with the world by its very nature. And then you learn from your parents, from your friends, from your extended family, from everyone in the world that, let's say, when we're out in public, we're not loud, okay? We're not loud in public because that makes a scene. And so you go on throughout your life, and if anyone else is out there making loud noises, you either say it to them directly or you internalize it and demonize them in your head. This reinforces your belief. This reinforces the ego, and it reinforces that filter that you've obtained from your parents. And it's simply that, a filter, because it was their layer of existence that they've put onto you. Every time that you say things like, we don't do that out in public, what a nuisance they are, making noise in public. And so you go on not making noise in public, because while we can dress it up however we want, we can say it's it's public decency, it's respectful, it is respectful, right? That's a nice little package. And so every time we go out in public, we say, well, the respectful thing to do is this, because we've received our values from our parents. Now, some things are more beneficial than others. This isn't to say that they're all bad. However, the ones that I would say are bad or not beneficial to us are the ones that stand in front of our soul's expression. This could be positive or negative. So when you're looking at these frames, for example, always be happy. That's a limiting factor, because that's an end result. That's a potential result of something. We can be happy. So what happens when you're not happy? Do you show up in the world? Do you carry shame? And it's a shame that this happens. It's a shame that this happens. And I say shame because it is a shame, because we shame others. because we shame it in ourselves. We shame it in ourselves, and by shaming it in ourselves, we shame it in others. It becomes a feedback loop. Have you ever heard this frame? Have you ever heard this frame of shame on you? Shame on you. You shouldn't do that. Have you ever heard this phrase or something similar? Shame on you. Other people projecting their shame. Shame on you. You shouldn't. Shame on you. You shouldn't do that. You should know better. Have you ever heard this phrase or something similar? Other people wanting to share their shame with you and reinforce their beliefs of the world upon you. Now, this may come from a place of respect. If you do something that goes against what someone else believes to be true and what they believe about themselves, they're going to shame you for you being how you are. And in the same sentence, you may also shame them for shaming you. You may also shame them for being the way that they are. Let's say you're loud and they're quiet. There's going to be an interchanging of shame that occurs. If we're focused on each other and if we're focused on judgment, we're focused on what that other person is doing that is wrong and shameful. And it also, the hidden thing in the background, it challenges my belief of the world. When it challenges my belief of the world, I don't want them to be right. I want them to be wrong. Because if they're right about their perception of the world, that can invalidate me. One of the biggest problems that can occur when we're having conversations with people is conflicting beliefs. Let's say I have a belief and you have a belief. If what I say conflicts with your belief, if it's different, we don't immediately agree, then what will occur is one of us will get defensive. One of us will go on the offensive and the other one will go on the defensive. We start a war. We go, I'm more right than you. And then you go, I'm more right than you. This creates a clashing, explosions. Within these explosions are the lack of ability to actually understand each other. Because within this perception is also, if I believe what you believe, if I allow your truth to exist, that invalidates my truth. Now, this is a program that is run by society, and it's not helpful to growth. It doesn't help keep an open mind because, hey, my belief is better than yours. What if both beliefs were valid? And what if there was actually a meta belief, something that was above those two beliefs that we could both believe in? But because we're so thick in these moments of discussion, we can't actually see the bigger picture. We're too busy playing in the fucking weeds that we can't actually see above the weeds and go, oh, we're actually fighting over the same thing. We actually believe the same thing. Here's the thing about your beliefs. Your beliefs are you taking a side, and when you go to speak to someone else, you will conflict with someone else's beliefs. Generally what happens is, if you actually zoomed out enough above those two beliefs, you'd see that you actually believe the same thing. Now, this is a real problem in this world, and there's so many conflicts that are created because of this. There would actually be a lot more value. I feel there would be a lot less value discrepancy. I feel there would be a lot less value discrepancies if people were able to step out of their beliefs and take a look from above. Because if I'm in a conversation with you and we're discussing beliefs, and one of my beliefs butts up against one of your beliefs, one of the healthiest things that we can do in that exchange is to understand where each other are coming from, to truly understand the nature of the belief, and for both of us to take a bird's eye view of that belief and look at it from the top. Quite often when this happens, we actually believe a lot of the same things, but because we're fighting in this positive, negative, bad, good realm, we're fighting the wrong battle. Because it's actually not me versus you. It's us versus the problem. And if we're able to look at the problem, we can take a step above and we can go, oh, we're both fighting over the same ball. Because the ball looks the same from the top, but you're just seeing if we're in a conversation, if we're in an argument and you have one belief and I have another belief, you say that every coin is heads and I say every coin is tails. If we're having a conversation and we find that we have different beliefs, if we're having a conversation and we discover that we have different beliefs, what we can do in that moment is, one, not argue to defend our belief. If we're having a conversation and find out that we have different beliefs, these beliefs generally conflict with one another. What we can do in that moment is seek to understand each other, and we can understand why we believe our certain beliefs. We can drop our egos out of the way, and we can have a clear discussion and find out what they are. What happens when we do this is we allow ourselves to take a bird's eye view of the situation, and oftentimes we end up finding that we're seeing two sides of the same coin. This changed my life. Being able to pull myself out of this perspective and not argue pointless battles with people. Because ultimately, it's this divide that is the battle between human beings. We're on the same side here. And when we can both actually look above and say, hey, we believe the same thing, we just see it differently, then the world is going to transform.